What's going on, people? It's your main man, Everything by John. I want to wish y'all a happy. That's a moment of silence. Moment of silence. I just messed up. We had to rewind that. What's going on, people? It's your main man, Everything. I don't have to double take. I know y'all wondering in the morning time why this guy wearing shades, right? But that's going into the content that I'm about to show you. So I want y'all to open your eyes. Yes, sir. I want you to open your eyes. I want you to get used to what's really going on out here. I want you to uncover the curtain that's been pulled over you. Kind of sound like Morpheus from The Matrix, but that's what's going on. That's a real, actual world situation right now. You know, sometimes we get stuck in our little box, which is the American society, which is the United States. The United States is our cubicle. We don't even understand what's going on worldwide. Politics, social awareness, creativity. These are some of the things that's locked down worldwide. Worldwide. I mean, in my class the other day, we were talking about, shout out to Professor Ukembe. I'm going to interview him soon. And speaking of updates, I'm going to interview, I have a few beautiful updates coming up, man. Podcasts. I'm about to start my little podcast. I want to start interviewing people. I want to start getting inside people's minds and putting them on a platform so they can be out there for the world. I don't care who you are. You know, that's the whole point of it. I don't want you to be popular. I want you to be regular, because I want the regular people and I want everybody in the world to see how regular people's minds are. Shout out to Brandon Jimenez, my guy. You next. I'm going to interview so many beautiful people, man. It's going to be crazy. You know, so like I said, on a worldwide scale. You see the little muscles coming in though, right? But anyway, I got an update on that coming soon. Brandon Jimenez and other people, we came together, collaborated and said, we got to put these people out there, right? So not only locally, you're going to find out what's going on with them, right? On the local side, what's going on literally where they live at, but on a worldwide community, I want to interview all types of people, all types of brands, all types of lifestyles, right? So anyway, this content right here is a few short clips. Shout out to Key and Peele. Sometimes they had low-key political scenes. That's like, wow, this is what's going on. This is what's going on, right? Let's get into it. Let's get into content. It's Everything by John, JDBK Assets. I got a lot of stuff coming soon, man. Just want to let y'all know. I'm going to see y'all in the next one.
Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure and an honor to meet you and your people. The U.S. government supports you in every possible way, ideologically, of course. However, we cannot offer any military aid at this time.
With all due respect, Ambassador, we need more than that.
We are dealing with terrorism on a daily basis.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Warlords overrun villages.
Yes, that's regrettable.
Rapes, tortures, all manner of human atrocities.
That's really sad. But the U.S. military is simply spread too thin. We can't afford another intervention at this time.
But what we could use your help with, really, is protecting our vulnerable, plentiful, and newly discovered oil reserves.
Oil? Excuse me 1 second. Operation Golden Eagle is a go. Welcome to democracy.
We also have natural gases.
Oh, yes, a lot of it.
Back in the good old days, if you were an ambitious empire builder looking to expand your territory and power, you just ran up the troops and invade wherever you please. But that came with a myriad of problems. The plebs in the country you're invading would retaliate and not comply. You lose some of your own troops who are replaceable, but would be better off fighting in a bigger war if necessary. Today, other global superpowers like Russia could rebel to protect their allies, and with the advent of nuclear weapons, that's a risk you probably shouldn't take. And most importantly, you built animosity with everyone you ruled over as more and more men came home maimed or dead, all for your trivial pursuit of power. So overall, violently invading other countries you want to capture just isn't a very good public relations move. Because as we all know, if the general public despises you, no matter how big, no matter how much power you have, it will eventually lead to your downfall. Today's leaders and superpowers no different though. In today's modern world, we needed a different strategy where we get the same outcome, control over another country to expand our empire, make more money, get access to their natural resources, etc., but without all the negatives that come with an all-out invasion. We needed a way where the people being conquered don't even realize that they're conquered. Enter debt.
In many ways, it's like a colonial war. The difference is that these days, people and the resources are controlled not by viceroys and occupying armies, but by other, more sophisticated means, of which the principal weapon is debt.
Debt is the most subtle and effective form of imperialism the world has ever known. Debt is as powerful as a bullet, but comes off as a rose. Here's how it works. Let's say you've got a huge construction company or engineering company that specializes in massive power plants, hydroelectric plants, or overall civil engineering infrastructure. Or maybe you're a very powerful politician with a stake in big private companies like these, which has been very common in the last few decades. You all want the same thing: more money and more power. But there are only so many giant new infrastructure projects first world countries need because they're already first world countries. So if you can't get new business domestically, how are you supposed to grow your business and profits? The answer? Third world countries, or as organizations like the UN call them, least developed countries, or LDCs. LDCs are nearly the perfect customers to build your empire with. Because they're so underdeveloped, they don't have much infrastructure to start with: electricity, running water, roads, buildings, hospitals, schools, all of which you provide. And since they've never had any of this, it's pretty easy to justify that, hey, if we build this stuff for you, your people and your economy will be a lot better off and would love you for it. And boom, you almost have a multi-billion-dollar strategy. But we're not quite there yet. The biggest problem standing in the way is just that. They're least developed nations, meaning that they don't have much money to pay you for these expensive projects to bring them into the modern world, because if they did have that money, well, they wouldn't be considered less than developed then. That is where the magic of debt in the form of foreign aid comes in. See, most people view foreign aid as a generous thing, like, wow, we're helping third world countries, that's so kind of us, honey. But for the most part, humans, especially those in power, don't do things out of the kindness of their hearts without other motives at play. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just human nature. And as a big construction engineering company, you love foreign aid because countries that previously couldn't afford your services all of a sudden can. And even if just one of these projects go through thanks to a third world country getting a giant loan, that's a good few $billion in your pocket that you wouldn't have earned otherwise. As a high-ranking politician, you also love LDCs taking on massive debt because the more entrenched a country is in your debt, the more they struggle to pay back the loan, the more it weighs down their population. The more power you have over it. You can ask them for favors, you can persuade them to vote for your interests in organizations like the UN. You can put strategic military bases on their soil, get access to their oil or rainforests, and much more. And of course, as a bank, you'd also be getting a metric ton of interest on these giant loans. So you're pretty happy too. So as you can see, there's a pretty big incentive for us not to only get these countries in debt, but to bury them in debt. Because the bigger the debt, the more interest, money, resources, and power you're gonna get back in return. And if you've noticed, all the benefits of third world debt are nearly exactly the same as what you get if you just straight up invaded and took over these countries by force. In the old way of imperialism, once you took over a territory, your nation's businesses had more customers to work with, your banks had more loans to give out and thus more interest to be collected, and of course, your government got more control and more power over more people. But with the new way of imperialism, third world debt, you get the exact same things, but the fundamental difference is that with the old way of doing things, those being ruled view you, the ruler, as the enemy. With debt, those being ruled view you as the savior. But there's still one more hurdle to get through. If the goal is to entrench countries in so much debt that they can't ever pay it off, how would you get any country, or any bank for that matter, to agree to such a deceptive proposition? Simple. Salesmen. They say the best salesmen are the ones that make the prospects feel like they're not even being sold to, that it was their own decision to buy. That's what we gotta do with these pesky third world countries to get them to take on these massive loans, and it's not as hard as you may think. See, third world countries have a ton of pain points, as you can imagine. People are starving, undereducated, don't have clean running water, don't have electricity, and the people in power are often corrupt and just want more power and money. So to convince them, we just have to play off of these pain points, but instead of just sending in annoying door-to-door salesmen to these countries, we just send in economists, engineers, analysts, and other people with very respectable titles. These people's jobs are to study the economy of the nation and make economic projections and studies of where the country might be 10, 20 years down the road if they had a shiny new hydroelectric plant built, for example. How much would the economy grow? How much would their gross national product grow? How many people would be lifted from absolute poverty and be given sufficient water, nourishment, and education? How much money would the royal families get in return if they went with the plan? The more optimistic the projections are, the more eager the leaders of the country will be to take on the debt, and the bigger the project can be justified. And of course, a bigger project comes with a bigger loan. So really, all the responsibility of making this entire scheme work, entrenching desperate countries in debt, rests on the shoulders of these professionals making these projections. If they fail to convince the government that they need these infrastructure projects, these companies lose out on billions of dollars. So it's pretty safe to say that there's probably a pretty big incentive to be a little extra optimistic with the numbers. And now more than ever, with all the research fraud coming up in the news, we can see that when data is buried and obscured in technical jargon, twisting studies to show the projections you want is not too hard, especially when we're talking about predicting 10, 20 years into the future. Your guess of how that future might look is as good as anyone else's. And if you get this step right, the banks will approve the loans and these plebeian countries will happily take the Trojan horse.
War and debt are exactly the same thing, except for one point, which is that nobody needs to occupy territory today.
This kind of thing has been happening since around the 1970s, and I guess it's been pretty effective so far, because why else would developing countries still have a growing $7.8 trillion in debt in 2018 alone and still be developing? Think about that for a second. Never mind the interest payments alone on the $7.8 trillion that's pure profits to the banks. All of that $7.8 trillion went directly from the banks to the developing countries and straight back into the companies. Isn't that beautiful? So the money kinda just moved around and never left the developed world. Except now it's on the backs of these third world people to pay back the loans and more, instead of putting that money back into the people in poverty. On top of that, because it's not easy keeping these giant infrastructure projects maintained, we'll have even more money coming in the future in the form of maintenance. What about all this virtual control over these countries that we keep talking about? How has that played out? Well, it's been pretty good. Half of all low-income countries are at a high risk of defaulting on all their debt. That's a lot of leverage. And just like that, in one relatively swift move, you, sir, have just secured the bag for billions in profits. And depending on the size of the loan, for all intents and purposes, you virtually conquered a country without firing a single bullet. No dead soldiers, no potential retaliation, not that much bad press either. Now I know what you're thinking, but Jake, how can I possibly live with myself doing this to these poor countries? Can't we make money and help people at the same time? What? Just take a deep breath and think of yourself as a soldier. When a soldier first takes a man's life, he questions himself, he questions his morality, he thinks about how the victim's family might feel. But as time goes on, as he takes more lives and more battles, it doesn't affect him as much anymore. It's kind of just part of the job. Or in other words, he's grown into a professional soldier. And that's what you gotta be, a professional soldier in this new game of imperialism. So sit back, relax, and bask in all that sweet third world profit.